What's going on, guys? Today is day 2 of our 3-day toy hunt down in Melbourne. If you missed the last episode, we touched down and made a dash straight from the airport to Lobo's Collectables, which was incredible, so check that one out if you missed it. Today we're getting an early start because we've got a packed itinerary. First stop today is Aron's Collectables in Blackburn, one of the places I've been most keen to hit up during this weekend away with my mate Dean and his dad Stan. Aron's has a great mix of toys and other collectibles with a strong focus on vintage items. I had an absolute blast last time I checked out Aron's Collectables a couple of years ago now, and it didn't take me long today to find my first grab. So right off the bat, I think I've got the opportunity here probably to complete my Kenner Robin Hood Prince of Thieves collection. First thing I spotted, we've got the Dark Warrior with the helmet, with the battle axe, and that tiny little knife in his waistband, which I didn't even know if that was actually a piece that the figure came with, because I've not seen one on card up close, so that's really cool to see. We've got Azim, who not only has his sword and his headscarf and all the rest, but it's in really nice condition. Often, when you see these Robin Hood Prince of Thieves figures loose, the soft goods kind of get a bit tatty, they don't age particularly well. We've got a Will Scarlet here with the crossbow, with the arrow and all of his soft goods. And then we've got the Sheriff of Nottingham over here, which I already have, but I don't have the sword, and he's got the little chain around his neck. So this is probably my first purchase that I've spotted. I know there's a couple in here that I already have that Dino's chasing, so I reckon between us both we're probably going to clear out these Robin Hood Prince of Thieves figures, so off to a good start. I was so pumped to see these vintage Kenner Robin Hood figures in this type of condition that I felt compelled to pull Dean aside and make sure I laid claim to them, because I know he collects this line as well. So the guys helped us out in pulling out all of the Robin Hood Prince of Thieves figures from the cabinet, and that started our pile. And these figures appear fresh off the card. Not only are the soft goods in far better condition than you generally see with loose examples out in the wild, but the tiniest of accessories are still in place, like the tiny dagger that sits under the waistband of the Dark Warrior that I've never actually seen before. You've also got the chain and medallion on the Sheriff of Nottingham. These tiny accessories would have been lost within 5 minutes of opening these figures up back in the day. And when I find loose examples, like I said, I never see these tiny parts. And not only that, like, check out the cape on the Sheriff of Nottingham. It's crisply folded behind his shoulders as it would have been in the package. So I tend to think that these figures were opened up by a collector probably relatively recently, at least in the past, say, 10 years, and displayed fresh off the card. So I was stoked to pick up the Sheriff of Nottingham, the Dark Warrior, Azim, and also Will Scarlet. And with that, my vintage Kenner Robin Hood Prince of Thieves figure collection is now complete, so I suppose it's on to the larger vehicle and weapon sets.
The evil Sheriff of Nottingham stole our weapon! Did I hear my name? It's Robin Hood and Will Scarlet! Dark Warrior, fire the bullet bomber! Look out! We still got another weapon, Sheriff! Fire the net launcher! Ah! The forest is safe again, for now.
Having a squiz at some of the vintage TMNT figures here at Aron's. There's a couple that I'm after. I'm really trying to complete the Movie Stars line from 1991. Belts there, a couple of size. It doesn't look like he comes with any other weapons, but he looks like he's in nice nick, so I reckon I'll add him to the pile. And then let me have a little squiz at the Mikey here as well, without knocking everything down. A little bit more playwear on this guy, but he does have the belts, the belt I should say, and he does have 2 of his chucks there. So I'll have a think about that one.
Now, I was in two minds about picking up this 1991 Movie Stars Mikey because of the condition of the figure, But Dino enlightened me to the fact that because these figures are so rubbery and pliable, the head and limbs pop off the joints really easily. So I was able to mix and match the parts with a version of the figure that I already have to create a nice, clean Movie Stars Mikey with the belt and the chucks. So I was stoked that I decided to pick it up in the end. Pretty cool selection of vintage G.I. Joe here. Not necessarily a line I collect, but still love all the colourful Joes from different eras. Pretty cool to see the Street Fighter Dal Zim figure there. That's like a subline of Joes I think that I could definitely pick up. But yeah, nice selection of Joes, different eras. And then we come down here and we've got even more, including a bunch of vehicles. And something that looks really cool is the G.I. Joe Live the Adventure board game up the back there. Might have to get that out and have a squiz. We've also got some really cool vintage real Ghostbusters, some Biker Mice from Mars, some Voltron action up the back there. This sludge bucket is something I'm definitely chasing, but without the tongue, I don't know if I can grab that because I just think that tongue piece is too tricky to find on its own, so I think I'll give that a miss, but still an awesome selection of some of these vintage lines here. This is pretty cool. We've got the Kenner Real Ghostbusters Vintage Ecto-1, nice and white and complete, but we've got the original box there. Now I've got the Ecto-1 complete already in my collection. In fact, I think I might have a couple, but I don't have the box, and that vintage box art is just absolutely iconic. Now it's not just the popular vintage action figure lines that Aron's Collectables are stocked with. You know, the crowd pleasers like TMNT, G.I. Joe and Masters of the Universe. They've also got all the weird and wacky stuff that I love. So if you follow my channel, you know that I'm a big fan of Mighty Max, but something else among the Mighty Max playsets that is really cool, which I've never seen before, is a Tarzan themed micro playset, which looks really cool. That's something I've definitely never seen before. And also among the Mighty Max is some Madballs. Now most of these are actually the more modern Madball releases. But if you look at the back there is what I think is a freaky fullback from the original foam Madballs line by Amtoy in the mid-80s. Definitely gonna have to have a squiz at that. Like the foam Madballs, the original ones, are just notoriously poorly conditioned when you find them loose. The foam was just not designed to last the test of time. They don't age particularly well. To see one in package is definitely worth having a look at. Obviously the card's got some wear, but I think I'll be getting that one out for a look.
Oh, look at that.
He's done it. That is really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to get the original foam vintage Madballs, you can really only get them on card because they're foam. I mean, these things just...
Yeah, I'll make life easy for you.
There we go.
Because I need to try to fit.
There we go. Yeah, that is really cool.
Got the front.
And so that one's the freaky fullback, and then we've got all the others on the back. And the carded freaky fullback wasn't the only vintage Madballs at Aron's. They also had some of the head poppers. Unfortunately incomplete. They had the head of Hornhead with the body of Bruise Brother. They were priced up as a pair. They also had some of the additional head popper heads with the awesome Madballs Mad Roller Cycle, which I love. Unfortunately that wasn't quite complete either, but still very cool to see. Yeah, it's just such a wild design for a vehicle, along with all the random little heads that pop out and the Mad Roller Cycle. Problem with something like that is like it's hard to tell what's missing and what's there. It looks pretty well complete. At least it looks close too.
I mean, clearly one of the biggest issues with any of this stuff is getting all the accessories.
Oh, definitely.
The amount of times we get collectibles come through and they're missing a million bits. And
I can imagine.
And it's just the nature of the beast.
Do you guys have like parts bins and stuff where you try to piece things together?
Yeah, Aron does it all the time. Yeah. So it's funny, you really do Frankenstein some stuff together,
I
but
bet.
in the end, the end result makes it worthwhile.
Absolutely. Now the vintage head poppers are my favourite Madballs line. I absolutely love them. And I've got to give a big shout out to Aron, because although he was selling them as a lot with the Mad Roller Cycle, he agreed to separate a couple of the heads that I'm chasing and sell them to me on their own. So first up we've got Scream and Mimi, and then we've got Hornhead, both in really nice condition, and I'm stoked to pick these up. And now I've just got to keep an eye out for some of the bodies with working clips, which is easier said than done, but I'll stay patient and hopefully eventually track those down, because like I said, I absolutely love the vintage Madballs head poppers.
You can switch heads from body to body. It's a world of funny friends and frenzied fun. The world of Madball action figures with head-poppin' fun.
From Amtoy.
This is pretty cool. This is definitely not something that I was expecting to see. So at Aron's, they got a big cabinet of Lego, some vintage, some more modern releases, but they've got one of the vintage Lego pirate sets with the Imperial Guard's fortress and some additional pieces like the rowboat, the cannon, and a couple of the Imperial Guard figures. So I'm assuming this is either late 80s, maybe early 90s. I think with the blue coats it was the late 80s. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not particularly knowledgeable about vintage Lego, but I've got a ton of nostalgia for vintage Pirates Lego. So I've got no idea how much they're asking for this, but I think it might be something I need to take a closer look at.
Sabre Island was the name of that vintage Lego pirate set. It was released in 1989, and I was definitely thinking about it. It was priced at $49, which I thought was a great price, but after comparing it to some photos, I realised it was missing a handful of pieces, so I decided to give it a miss on that basis. But some vintage Lego pirates is something that I'm definitely keen to add to my collection in 2025. We picked an awesome day to visit Aron's Collectables because not only is the shop stocked, as you can see, but they had the upstairs storeroom open, which was really cool to check out.
This is pretty sweet. A Globo bootleg or knockoff Robin Hood figure, larger scale than the Kenner, but looks to be some reuse of some moulds, particularly with the crossbow there and the arrow. But I kind of want to know now what he looks like underneath the big cloak. Very cool. I recognise that packaging art peeking out from behind the episode 1 Sabre. The TMNT Pizza Power board game from Krona.
As you can see, there was some cool stuff upstairs. Nothing I really needed to add to my collection, though I was tempted by that bootleg Robin Hood after picking up all the Kenner figures downstairs. But what was most cool was just seeing some of the stuff that Aron had packed away.
It's just backing cards, instructions.
Yeah.
So there's a real one. That was the Australian, they did prints and stuff.
Oh, that's really cool.
From the 80s. So.
Believe it or not, this upstairs area used to be a massage joint. So you've got all these little rooms off the central area. Each of those rooms is just stacked with boxes of excess stock, some of which Aron had acquired in estate sales. So it was just really cool to have a look around. I know Dino really enjoyed it, but after that it was time to head back downstairs and check for any last minute pickups before we hit the road.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's a beauty.
Yeah. That must have only just arrived because I've not seen it.
Before leaving Aron's, I grabbed this vintage G.I. Joe Live the Adventure board game for Andrew from Keep On Collecting, and then it was time to settle the bill and then on to the next. Today we're following up Aron's Collectables by hitting up some of Melbourne's antique markets, starting with the awesome Pickers Retro Haven at Beaconsfield. This was my first time checking out Pickers, and it's awesome. It's got a bunch of stalls dedicated to vintage toys and retro video games, as well as other pop culture relics. It's also got a ton of old electronics, books and magazines, decor, car parts and automotive paraphernalia, and so much more. Upstairs they had large areas dedicated to vinyl, VHS and other physical media, as well as audio-visual equipment, and I only wish we had time to really go through it all, but obviously this weekend the focus is vintage toys, and at this point it was time to head to the next one, which is the Waverly Antiques Bazaar. The Waverly Bazaar is massive, and again the vintage pop culture presence is strong, with stalls dedicated to toys, comics and other collectibles from the era we love. We even saw some complete vintage TMNT figures and a Technodrome, which is pretty crazy for an antique market. I didn't pick up anything from these two antique markets, but I could walk around these joints all day, and I know my mates Dean and Stan also enjoyed them and picked up a few items, so make sure you check out Totally Taylor Retro Hunters for more coverage of the antique bazaars, as well as all the places that we hit up during this toy hunting weekend in Melbourne. Next up, we headed back into town to check out a couple of places along Chapel Street, starting with Comics R Us, a store that's been around for more than 30 years, and not only has a great range of comics, but also some cabinets of vintage toys as well. there's no comics I'm really chasing at the moment, aside from a couple that are based on vintage toy lines that I collect. But I have been after some old monster magazines, and at Comics R Us they had a box of old famous monsters of Filmland magazine, and I went through and I picked up this issue here. This is issue 132 from March of 1977, a King Kong special featuring a beautiful Basil Gogos cover. I just thought this would make a great display piece and a beautiful backdrop to a vintage monster toy display. Finally, at this point we had time for one last spot just up the road from Comics R Us, the Chapel Street Bazaar. Now, we didn't have time for a proper hunt at the Chapel Street Bazaar because we arrived not long before close, but also because we were stopped in our tracks by a stall that had an incredible selection of vintage movie posters, and between Dean, Stan and I, we stocked up. Now, there was a couple of posters that I was looking at. I was really thinking about this Spanish one sheet for Terminator 2 Judgment Day, or in the case of the Spanish release, Terminator 2 El Juicio Final. But I decided ultimately on this one right here, a beautiful Australian daybill of Batman 1989. Now, I decided on the daybill poster for Batman for a couple of reasons. Firstly, the Australian daybill is a classic Australian cinema poster format, and also I've got other daybill posters framed in my collection room, so I thought the Batman 89 poster would slot right in. So with all of that done, a vintage toy store, a comic store and 3 antique markets, it was time to call it quits for the day and head off for a few beers and some dinner. So that'll bring us to the end of today's video. Make sure you check out Totally Taylor Retro Hunters for Dino's coverage of the trip, and of course stay tuned for the final one. Day 3, the main event, the giant-sized vintage and modern toy fair at Caulfield. I can't wait to bring that video to you guys. But that'll do us for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you made it this far, you're a dead set champion. I hope to hear from you in the comments. As always, you're more than welcome to drop us a line on Instagram at Crusher Collects to say g'day. I'll see you guys back soon for the next one, and until then, cheers.